Yeah, mic check, mic check. Man, it was good. We are back and we are officially live. Welcome to Kicking the Real podcast. I am your host, Andy Diosa. If you're a first time listener, thank you for being here. And if you're a multiple time listener, as always, thank you for being here. I'm back. It's just me on the screen again. I don't love to do this all the time, but you know what? I was thinking because Major League Soccer seasons is just here in full force, and if you know me, I'm very busy throughout the season. It's what I do for work, so it takes up a lot of time. But back a few years ago, when I was writing for Yahoo, I actually had a weekly piece that I used to put together, which is winners and losers of the match day, and it was a cool way to just touch on a few teams, not getting too in depth, but just kind of touch on some of the storylines that intrigued me and are important moving along. So there's a lot of people that still do it. Good job on written pieces, on video pieces, and I figured, you know what, let me get back into it because it's going to be a good way for me to move along this season as it happens and kind of keep me in the flow of it. Maybe I'll bring some friends on to discuss their winners and losers if they agree, disagree. Maybe some guests in the past that have already been on the show, but we'll workshop all that. This is just an idea that I had while I was wrapping up match day 2 that just finished, and I was like, you know what, this would be fun to do on the podcast. So let me do it. So basically, what I'm gonna do is three winners, three losers. I'll put them on the screen and talk about it, exactly what I'm thinking, and that's it. It's that simple. It's exactly what it sounds like. I do want to start with San Diego FC, and this is not part of the winners and losers portion. Although, if I think about it, they could be technically considered a winner and a loser this past weekend. But San Diego FC, I was at Snapdragon Stadium Saturday night for their inaugural home match, and it was a great time. It was a scoreless draw against St. Louis City, which was the bad part about it because I really love being at these first home games. I've been to many of them. In 2021, I was in Austin for their first home game. In 2022, I was in Charlotte for their first home game. In 2023, I was in St. Louis for their first home game. And now 2025, San Diego. And I will say that the one in St. Louis still was my favorite, probably in terms of energy and in terms of everything that surrounded the game itself. But then as I was thinking back on that, that's the only one of the 4 games that the team actually won. St. Louis beat Charlotte FC 3-1, if I'm not mistaken, in that game. So I kind of helped add to the spectacle of the fans of St. Louis. I remember the Austin home game was against San Jose Earthquakes. It was a scoreless draw, which it was a fun time to be at, but a scoreless draw, 2022, Charlotte actually lost to the LA Galaxy in their first home game. And I remember that vividly for a few reasons. I was sitting next to my boy, Tommy Scoop, shout out to Tom Bogert, in the press box that day. And I remember it was just 0-0, kind of going towards the end. And I see Efrain Alvarez ready to sub in. And I had a premonition. I was like, yo, Efra's about to come into this game and act up. And if you're watching on YouTube, I have visual proof of this. I tweeted it out. I said, Efra is about to come on and act up in front of almost 75,000 fans in Charlotte. That is all. And a few minutes later, he scored a banger, and the Galaxy won 1-0. And I tweeted, "You're welcome, Galaxy fans. Que golazo por Dios." And everybody was like, "Oh my God, you called it that. I'm so psychic and all that." But no, it's just funny to remember that moment because they kind of, I want to say, ruined the party for Charlotte that day. But I mean, 75,000 fans in a football stadium for your first home game was incredible. And Charlotte brought a lot of energy that day. But anyway, I'm going far fetched already. San Diego, as you can see, has been added to the Scarf Wall inaugural match, Snapdragon, and the spectacle was great. I mean, obviously, fans waited for it. San Diego is a great city to visit. If you haven't, please do yourself that favor. I'm not San Diego travel board or anything like that, but I do love San Diego, and the energy was dope. There was some stars in there. Manny Machado obviously got a big ovation before the start of the game. San Diego Padres player Issa Rae and Thames were there, which I did not see. Unfortunately, they were hiding somewhere in a nice suite, but they're part owners of the San Diego FC team, so they were there. I did get stuck walking behind Ryan Garcia, the boxer, after the game in the hallway, which was pretty funny because everybody was stopping in for pictures. So it just kind of like lets you know about how these events are. They're big deals, and aside from the game itself, which I'll talk about a little bit, I think it's just cool to kind of be around those moments and witness history in real time, which is something I've always said I enjoy is witnessing those moments in real time. But B, it's almost like a reminder of all the people that you see, and you go to these games and you see so many familiar faces, and it's fun. It's fun to just catch up with people. It's fun to meet some new people in those kind of spaces. And I did make the joke that myself and the commissioner were like probably the only few people that have been at all of these openers that I just listed. And that I was reminded by my friend Dan Cordomacha, MLS front office, that he, of course, is commissioner's right hand, so he was also at those games. But we just, it's just cool to kind of catch up with all those folks in those spaces. So great time in San Diego. They're still searching for their first home win. Whenever that happens, it'll be a big moment. But it was cool to be there. Cool to see the stadium packed out. 34,000, I believe, was the number. 34,506. So good job from the fans down there showing out and supporting the team. The loser side of it, it was Shoki Lozano being injured like 26 minutes into the game, kind of just was running and looked like he grabbed his hamstring, and that didn't seem well. There's still not any news about how much of a serious injury it is or if it isn't. They kind of talked it down a little bit post game yesterday. Mostly Todd Heap saying that he was in good spirits, but we still don't know. We still have to see how those tests look and what that injury is for Chucky Lozano. Hopefully, it isn't long term because star player, franchise player, face of the team, just in the second game ever going down is not what you want to see. But good luck to San Diego the rest of the way. Obviously, the first expansion season is very tough, and there have been good cases of it. St. Louis has shown it, and there's been bad cases of it. So let's see what San Diego could do, but there will be a lot of attention, and hopefully I will be back down there again at some point this season. I will say the last thing that was pretty cool about being there yesterday is I was walking around the concourse before the game started, and I just saw Juan Pablo Angel and Diego Valeri just having an open conversation in the middle of the concourse of the stadium, like in the public, while people are just walking past. And if you're a real like soccer and especially MLS fan, you're like, oh my God, this is, kind of crazy to see them out in open just talking. And if you're just like a regular person that was in San Diego to watch the game, you probably just walked right past them. But it was another one of those moments that I'm like, yeah, this is a special night, and things that will only happen in San Diego tonight is seeing that. So that was cool. But anyway, that was a very long intro to touch on San Diego, and they're not even on the list of winners and losers. So let's get into this thing, man. I'm gonna try to put this banner up. I'm trying to get fancy with it. My production team. All right, 3 winners for me, and this is kind of encompassing. I want to say match day 1 and match day 2. It's not going to be just based on this weekend, so it's kind of all encompassing. And the idea I have is probably not do this weekly because that's just too much of a commitment. But kind of do it sporadically and group the time that I've missed, kind of group that up. So if that makes sense, you'll kind of see where I'm going with it. So my 3 winners are the Philadelphia Union, the San Jose Earthquakes, and the Vancouver Whitecaps. Now, 2 of those teams, actually, if I'm being honest, probably all 3 of those teams I would have not expected to be on this list before the season started, but it's MLS. Crazy things happen, and here we are. Let's start with the Philadelphia Union. Ty Baribo had a hat trick this past weekend. He scored 2 goals in the opening week win against Orlando City, and this is kind of crazy because now he has 5 goals in 2 weeks, and I think there's only like 4 players ever in MLS history to do that. Chicharito was the last one that did it in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. But in general, the more important part here is the Union moving on from Jim Curtin, and there was kind of just this unknown about what the team was going to be like and exactly what direction they were going to go in. And I did agree with maybe moving on from Jim because it felt kind of stale. You're talking about a team that traditionally makes the playoffs and is always kind of there in the mix in the East, and then they just didn't do that last year. They weren't in the playoffs for the first time in a long time, and things did have to change. Now, I do love the fact that they brought Bradley Carnell in. My guy, Bradley Carnell, one of my favorite coaches that I've talked to around MLS, and I just think that Bradley Carnell being fired from St. Louis was kind of premature after having such a great expansion season, but things happened the way they did in St. Louis. So Bradley Carnell gets a job in Philly, and it kind of seems like that boost of energy again in Philly, where it was a little similar to what Bradley did in St. Louis, where that first season he was there, it was just straight to it. They're gonna play the style that they play. They're gonna press, and they're gonna all be moving together in the same way and believe in themselves. And I know this is gonna sound like overreaction or maybe trying to do too much because we're only 2 weeks into the season, but I think there are definitely tangibles there for Philly under a coach like Bradley Carnell, who knows MLS well, who has these players like Ty Baribo. You're talking about Gazdag. You're talking about Ure, who scored in the first week as well. But then there's just this a little bit of familiarity from the team, but there's also this kind of like, hey man, we have a lot to prove, right? And I think that's what it comes down to in Philly. They have a lot to prove to kind of erase what they've done this past season that just ended, kind of erase that, like, we didn't like how that went, but also get to that point where they're used to being the Eastern powerhouse. They're used to being up there. And the one downfall for Philly is they get to these points and don't win trophies. But it's a progress, right? It's a process to get that progress. So you have to make those steps, and the first step is obviously getting back to the playoffs. Listen, like I mentioned, we're just 2 weeks into the season, so all of this could be irrelevant, but it's a great start for them. 2-0 is an excellent start, and they did it against Cincy this past weekend, and I think that's what was important. Doing that against Cincy with Ty Baribo's hat trick, that's a statement to the Eastern Conference, not only just the MLS, but specifically to the Eastern Conference, where people have Cincinnati up there as one of the top dogs, and Philly early in the season is shaking the table like, hey, don't forget about us. So Ty Baribo ended last year on a pretty good streak of scoring. He started this one on a phenomenal streak of scoring, and the fact that the pieces there are familiar with I guess, the league, the system, although it's a bit different from what Jim Curtin was doing there. But I think Bradley Carnell has had a good buy-in already. You could see it for sure, and you could kind of hear it from some of the players the way they're talking. I like it. I like the start for Philly. The city. I mean, they just won a Super Bowl. It feeds off the energy of the fans, and if the fans could get riled up behind this team, if the team keeps pouring in these results, the Union are going to have something to say this season. So I like the start. Salute to, once again, my boy Bradley Carnell, who is much deserved of great success in MLS, and I'm glad that it's gotten off to a good start in Philadelphia for him. Speaking about much deserved and second chances of that nature, the San Jose Earthquakes. Man, if you listened to my season recap episode with David Goss, shout out to Soccer Wise, my boy Goss, I had joked about the San Jose Earthquakes being good this year because the MLS records and things like that kind of favor MLS teams that weren't in the playoffs the previous year to go to MLS Cup. So I made a joke like, hey, man, Bruce is in San Jose. Maybe that's it. It's going to be the Earthquakes versus the Fire. That was wholeheartedly a joke, and I admit that. 2 weeks into the season, I'm ready to stop joking about the San Jose Earthquakes. They're real. They're restoring the feeling in the Bay Area, and Bruce Arena is out on a revenge tour. Man, this hits me in a lot of different ways because of everything that's transpired with Bruce over the past year or two, and we'll get to that a little later. But it's an incredible start for a team that was absolutely terrible last season and had been absolutely terrible for a few seasons now. Bringing in somebody like Bruce is in itself a big move, right? Because arguably the best coach in MLS history, one of the more popular coaches in U.S. soccer history. But when they got out to that 4-0 win in opening weekend against RSL, it was like, oh, okay, we should probably be paying attention. And the thing that was important about that win is that the goal scorers, it wasn't Chicho Arango, it wasn't Joseph Martinez, it was like Oseni Buda and players like that shout out to Oseni, that's my guy too. Another person that I really had a good time talking to and interviewing him in the past. But Ricketts and things like that. Like there's players that scored that you were like, this is not maybe exactly what you would expect when you have a team led by Chicho Arango and Joseph Martinez, but 4 goals in the opening game was a statement from the Earthquakes. And then they follow it up and they win this game against SKC 2-1. And what happens? Chicho Arango scores his first goal for the Earthquakes. Joseph Martinez scores his first goal for the Earthquakes. And it's just a change of what people have been used to in the past from the San Jose team. I love it, man. Listen, I don't know if it's sustainable, but it's Bruce Arena. I fully believe that one thing they're going to do is just run and play offense. And in MLS, that works. Maybe if defensively they're lacking in places and things of that nature, it might get tricky when you get, deeper towards the season or into a playoff run. But for now, I'm all in. Take my money. Chicho and Joseph look like they're having fun. I mean, that's important when you have 2 goal scorers that could do it. Chicho has done it in this league. Joseph tied Bradley Ray Phillips for 6th all-time on the MLS scoring list this past weekend. So, I mean, you have those guys. You kind of just let them go at it. I don't know. This is the team I'm probably most excited to watch this year and see how it all unfolds. But if this is a Bruce Arena revenge tour, which it certainly seemed like it is, I'm in. I'm fully in, and I will be up at PayPal Park at some point this season, watching this team live. Maybe at multiple points this season because it's not far from me here in LA. But yeah, shout out to the Earthquakes, man. I mean, 6 goals in 2 games, and they only conceded one, and it was a penalty. Something to be said there for sure as well. And my third winner, the Vancouver Whitecaps. And this is kind of similar to Philly in the terms of a new head coach, because Vanni Sartini was such a figure and such a person to follow in MLS because of his quotes, because of um, his attitude, the way he maneuvered. It's just so many different things that made people really gravitate towards Sartini. And I don't think he was a bad coach, but it also kind of got stale for Vancouver and in a tough Western Conference in the years that they were there, kind of in the playoff mix and losing in the playoffs. It's tough because you're running into some opponents that have better top end talent, that just have a little more experience, and a lot of times in MLS, that's what kind of does the trick. So they went in a new direction. They have a new head coach now, and you kind of just didn't know what to expect. But listen, man, that 4-1 win over the Timbers at Portland in the opening weekend is a big deal for them. Just showing like, hey, man, we're still going to be consistent enough to play uh, quality soccer, and that's what it comes down to. And when you have players like Brian White, Ryan Call, that who have done it over and over in this league, it just shows so much poise, right? And I think that's the word that I think of when I think about the Whitecaps is poise. They don't really seem to kind of get out of their, I don't know, their scheme, their way. Like they're very level headed. And I thought that was a Benny Sartini thing, but in these first 2 weeks of this season, I've seen that that might just be a thing that they have at the franchise. And unfortunately, Sam Adekugbe, who scored in both games this season, gets hurt against the Galaxy, and that looked like it was a bit serious. So that's tough to see. But this is a team that I could see them being on the top end of the Western Conference. And the Western Conference, to me, that's kind of open and has teams that could fluctuate. I think this is a team that we could see be consistent throughout the year. Um, I know the injury is tough there, but I do believe that they have pretty good pieces to be competitive this season, to be amongst the better teams, if I put it that way. And I think them being in CONCACAF Champions Cup as well kind of helps because you get a little bit more of that boost. Like they beat Saprissa in the first round. Now they're going to play Monterrey. Whether or not they win or lose that series, it's just another way of testing your team out and seeing what they have. But I think those teams in Canada get slept on from the larger audience. But I think you guys should definitely be paying attention to Vancouver. At least the first 2 weeks in the season, they're telling us that we should for sure, because beating the Timbers in Portland is probably never an easy task, and they handled them 4-1, and then you bounce back and beat the defending MLS Cup champion LA Galaxy, and that's a hell of a way to start a season against two teams in the West that you'll probably be competing with for seeding all year. Pretty good start in Vancouver. So shout out to the Whitecaps. I'll also be in Vancouver this year, and I'll be catching some games at BC Place. So just checking them off the list, but we'll be there. Now, transitioning over to the losers. And speaking of the MLS Cup champion LA Galaxy, my three losers are the LA Galaxy, the New England Revolution, and the Houston Dynamo. We'll start with the Galaxy, and this is tough because we knew they were going to be in a tough spot coming into the season to begin with Ricky Puig's ACL injury, and that's a long road recovery. So you're already factoring their biggest player being out for this long, already puts them behind the 8 ball. Now the problem is Ricky was so influential to how that team played, and you kind of see when Ricky's on, the team's on, and when Ricky wasn't really doing it, the team struggled. And it's tough for one player to have that much of an impact on your team. But what we saw last season was that there were those pieces that could kind of step up when it wasn't just Ricky. And 95% of the time it was Ricky and company, but it all worked together because they were all in conjunction, right? Or take Ricky out of that equation. Now you're trying to plug and play, right? You're talking about somebody like Marco Royce, who we don't know if he's even at 100. He wasn't at the end of last season. It doesn't seem like he really is right now. And then you got to start seeing all the injuries that are piling on them. And you could say this about any team, injuries. There are a few injuries away from being good or being bad, but the defending champions starting. Holy shit. that was an earthquake or some shit. The defending champions starting a season losing their first two games is not a good look, right? They lose to San Diego, who's playing their first game ever, and then they bounce back and go to Vancouver and lose to Vancouver, and now they have to take a flight to Costa Rica where they're going to make their CONCACAF Champions Cup debut for this edition of the tournament against Herediano. And you're starting to piece it together, and you're like, man, you would think that this team would get off to, I don't want to say a good start, but get off to a start that gives them a little confidence after winning the title and kind of bringing that joy back to LA. And these two games, it seemed like things have drastically just gone downhill, unfortunately for Greg Vanny. Once again, to the injuries, big deal. They're without a lot of players. Joseph Painsil is out for a few weeks. This game in Vancouver, Mickey Imani did not travel. A little hamstring injury he's dealing with. Amiro Garces apparently dealing with an injury as well. Mauricio Cuevas. And you're going, and then Lucas Anauria, who's the new midfielder, apparently has a fracture in his collarbone, if I'm not mistaken. So this list is just getting longer and longer, and that's when the depth starts getting tested. And right now, it doesn't seem like the Galaxy have too much of that. You would expect in the perfect world that they were going to go to this CONCACAF Champions Cup and make a nice run, or at least be competitive, right? And kind of like put that stamp on, like, yeah, we won the MLS Cup and we're here in this tournament. I'm not confident that they even beat Herediano with the way this team looks, because now you're factoring in rotation. Now you're factoring in what's more important to me. They should be going all in on the Champions Cup and at least try to get past that first round series, or not the first round, their first round series, because they were on a bye. But this is now round of 16. But the way the team is lined up, and now Diego Fagundes is like, we got to go to Costa Rica and get a result. It's a must win. I mean, it's March 2nd, and that's what he's talking about, a must win already. Man, I'm not hitting the panic button once again, just 2 weeks into the MLS season, but things are looking a little tough in Galaxy land there. I'm taking a long pause here because speaking of things looking tough, New England Revolution need a revolution. They need something to happen that's going to change and shake this team up, because they thought Caleb Porter might have been that after the whole Bruce Arena thing unfolded, and I haven't seen it. And you have to give Porter Wright a little more time this year to work with the team that he has, the players that he wanted, that he's been saying, these are my guys. But I just haven't seen anything exciting about this team for a long time, probably since Bruce Arena was around. And it's crazy to see Bruce Arena and San Jose getting off to the start that he has with so many former Revolution players, which is super telling. But prior to this game against, who was it they played this past week? The Columbus Crew, sorry. Prior to the Columbus Crew game, they said, this is an opportunity for us to make a statement. This is an opportunity for us to kind of show who we are. It was a home opener in Foxborough, which optics terrible because empty football stadium, it's cold, it just doesn't look good, a lot of empty seats. And then the soccer itself is not great. It's uninspiring. They don't score. So what statement was made? That's what I want to know. What statement have the Revolution been making for these past, I don't know, let's say year and a half, 2 years, for example? When all this Bruce Arena stuff unfolded, things just happened behind the scenes and things got ugly quick. And it was almost like there was no sense of direction. There was not a lot that was talked about, not a lot that was, I guess, in terms of being transparent, not a lot that was known. And then they tried a few things, didn't work. And everything that seemingly was a next step for the Revs has been almost like a step backwards, if we want to be honest, almost like regression. This is a larger issue. This is Robert Kraft levels, right? This is ownership down. It's not just to pile on Caleb Porter. It's not to pile on any of the players, because I've said this about the Revs for the past 3-4 years. Talent-wise, they've been there. And if these guys could all be on the field at the same time, they would have been a great thing, because they had a very talented attack, good forwards, great midfielders. But then it was one injury, it was another injury, and once again, it stems from the top. You're talking about a team that plays on a turf field at Gillette and bad weather. It's just so many things around the Revs. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is because I was having a conversation at the office the other day, and somebody asked me, like, what is it with the Revolution? I was like, it's just uninspiring. Like, nothing about this team screams inspiring when when things have been the way they are, I just don't know. Like there's no energy and emotion behind this team. And it seems to me that it's been that way for a while. And it's unfortunate because there are some talented players on that roster. But I just don't know if Caleb Porter's the guy. And I'm usually a person that gives coaches a lot of the benefit of the doubt and some leeway. But I don't know, man. The longer this lingers, I think the leash has to get shorter. But then once again, if you kind of move into the direction of like maybe we move on from Porter, what's the plan? Because when they moved on from Bruce, the plan was not clear, and whatever they put together, it was not good. So a lot of things have to happen in New England and Foxborough, and it hurts because that's the home team. I want to see the Revs do well, of course, but yeah, I just think there's no energy, no excitement around the team. It's flat, and if Caleb Porter is continuously saying we're going to keep improving, but you just don't see those improvements, right? So what happens next? How long does this linger on for? Are the Revs a bottom of the barrel team in the East, which seems like it's going to be pretty competitive this season? I don't know. We'll see. And lastly, I'm going to go with the Houston Dynamo. Probably a little bit of the recency bias because I just watched Miami demolish them 4-1 on Sunday Night Soccer. But man, 2 games already, right? This whole Ben Olsen thing, he wants to play out of the back and build out from the back. And they've given up 2 goals on some awful play out of the back. And I understand these are the growing pains of a coach trying to implement these systems and trying to teach these players, different schemes and things of that nature in soccer. But it looks bad, man. It looks bad. And if we're talking about uninspiring performances, that's exactly what I've seen from Houston. I mean, I'm talking about a team that it's crazy to think that Hector Herrera was such a big piece on this team. And I know he's a great soccer player, but take him out of the equation, take Coco Carrasquilla out of the equation, who was hands down their best player. And now it's like, man, there's nothing going on. There's no motor. They didn't really rebuild the team that great when they had the chance to. There was just not a lot of movement. Shout out to Jack McGlynn, great player. But I think him going to Houston, it kind of just throws him in a situation where he's not super comfortable. And it's going to take time, of course, for Jack McGlynn. I think that he will have some success there. But in the short term, like getting off to a bad start and having these moments is only gonna hurt this team. It's only gonna hurt the player. It's a young kid. He has a lot of responsibility on his shoulders now, being there, and I just don't see it, man. I just don't. Like I mentioned, teams need these top end talent players to compete, and Houston doesn't have that. So they need to have a plan for the summer or something that's going to kind of build this team up, or it's going to be a tough season for Ben Olsen and the Houston Dynamo for once again a franchise and a team that's kind of gotten used to that, unfortunately. Although they did win, U.S. Open Cup a few years ago, and that was a great moment for them. But I think there needs to be more there. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like they are moving in the right direction. But they have Nico Lodeiro. He comes off the bench and he scores his first goal with the Dynamo as a consolation prize in the 4-1 loss to Inter Miami without Lionel Messi. But hey, man, like I said, it is just week 2. So these are my winners and losers. I think that went well. I enjoyed it. We'll see when I come back with the next one. It kind of just depends on how the league is going, how the weeks are going, and now with CONCACAF and all that stuff mixed in between, things will get a little tricky, but there's a lot of games, and I got my eyes on it all. So that's it. Thanks for tuning in. We'll bring it back at some point. I don't know when. Stay on the lookout. Thanks for listening. Tap in on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Send it to a friend. Send it to your grandma. I'm just playing. If you're an audio listener and not on YouTube, thank you for listening on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Today you missed out on the Noda Brewing Company jersey that I'm wearing. This is a classic. This is one I got in Charlotte, and if you know, you know. Shout out to Noda, and that's my honorable mention, Wilfred Zaha and Charlotte FC. But we'll have time to talk about that in the future. Now I'm just rambling. Now I gotta go because I think there was an earthquake, and I don't know what the hell that noise was. I'm gonna go try to find out if it was a bum trying to sneak in through my window, if it was an earthquake. So until the next time, much love. Peace.